Hello, this video isn't about what caravan you need to buy. Now that isn't very important to know because you need to know the right layout and everything else that goes with that. There is another important thing to know. It's where to buy the caravan from. Now essentially there's two places you can do that. You can buy it privately or you can buy from a dealership. And there are pluses and minuses to both of those things. So let's talk about the private individual first. Now, the main plus to that is that you should get the caravan for less money than you would do from a dealership. The reason for that is because the private individual doesn't have the kind of overheads that a dealership does. They don't have to pay staff, they don't have to pay for premises and all the kind of things that go along with running a business. Then you might get some extra kit. Now, if the customer is selling up and they're not caravan anymore, then they may well throw everything in with it that you need to run the caravan. So your acca roll, your waste mask, your battery and gas bottles and everything like that. And also you may well get an awning. A lot of dealers will take the awnings out because it gives them the opportunity to sell you a new awning, or they can't guarantee how good the awning actually is. So those are the plus points. Now I'm going to go over those a little bit closer now because there is a few caveats to those. Now price, it is a bit of an urban myth that you're going to get a better price by buying off a private individual. It can be the case, but you've got to make sure that that is the case. And like I said, it should be around about 10% less. But recently what's happened is that people have bought, in the COVID crisis, inflated prices because there was just no caravans around and everyone wanted to buy one. Now what's happened is actually the market's gone the other way and there's a lot of caravans out there with not many people buying. So they've gone to sell the caravan back to the dealership and they've gone, well, we just don't want it anymore. So they've been given a very low price. Then what they've done is gone online and seen that everyone else is putting them up for this kind of money. So that's what they do. So you've got to make sure that you actually are getting good value for money. And like I said, it should be 10% less. Now you can do that yourself by just checking around on other dealerships and seeing if you can see what the dealership prices are for that kind of thing and subtract that 10% off. Or of course, because you've signed up to this course, you can just message me on Messenger via Facebook, tell me the year, the make, the model, any kit you're getting with it, and I can tell you whether you're in the right ballpark or whether you can go back to them and say, look, this just isn't realistic, or whether it's best to walk away. There are some caravans that I wouldn't recommend buying, and I'm going to be going through that in a later video, but I will tell you whether it's best not to go down that route. So you're fairly lucky. Again, you can do that price check via me, and then you'll know, at least you'll know that you're in the right ballpark. Again, the kit, make sure that you're getting value for money. There's no point paying extra over the odds for stuff that you're not going to be using. And unfortunately, sellers do that fairly often. They will overvalue what the kit they're giving because they paid retail for it, and they'll see it as a whole and they'll probably charge an extra £500 for it, when in reality, it's not worth anything like that. So make sure you're getting the van at the right price. Make sure you're not overpaying for all the kit that you'll be getting with it. And then we get to the awnings. If you get offered an awning and the seller says, oh yeah, it's worth £500. If it isn't something you'd like or you're going to see the benefit of, then there's no point paying £2,000 over the price of the caravan for an Isabella that you're never going to put up. So check out my video on awnings to see whether you're going to actually see the benefit of an awning or not, and what type you're going to need. So what I tend to do is say to the seller, right, okay, if it's worth £500, what if you take it out, sell it on eBay for £500, you get your £500 for it, and then I get the caravan for something round about where I want to be paying, because I'm never going to use the awning. I don't want to be paying for it. That does one or two things. It kind of reduces the value of it in the seller's mind, because they probably can't be bothered to do that, and they kind of know they're not overly truthful. There's always something wrong with the awnings in my experience. It might be different because they're selling to a dealer and they're not so worried about that, and they might be a bit more truthful when they're selling to a private individual because of their conscience, I'm not sure. Yeah, I tend to find that what they say about their awnings and the kit isn't generally true. So take it with a pinch of salt. Unless you can verify it, if it's all nicely neat underneath the bed and everything looks really good, then that's fine. But again, there's no point paying for it if you're never going to use it. So just be wary of that. Just make sure you're getting value for money of what you actually want. So that's the upsides to it, with a bit of a caveat on it. Make sure you're actually getting those upsides. Now we get to the downsides now, and this is where it becomes quite important. A private individual isn't deemed to be an expert in selling caravans. So what they say regarding the health of the caravan and the spec and everything, and whether it's working or not, again, can be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt. I would say 80% of people out there are truthful. They will tell you if there's something wrong with it, and they'll maybe reflect that in the price. But because they're not deemed to be an expert, if there's anything in the caravan that they don't know about, and then you go and buy the caravan and say it's got lots of water ingress in it, which they didn't even know was there, you've got no comeback whatsoever. So this is very important. We've had several occasions over the years where customers have bought caravans privately, up country or wherever it happens to be, bought it in for a service, and then we've had the horrible job of telling them that it's got £3,000 worth of damp in it. There's no comeback whatsoever, so you have to be very careful with that. I've just had an occasion actually where a customer bought a van in for sale or return, and they were told that it had had a service about a few months prior, and it had been given a clean bill of health, and they thought there was no water ingress in it, only for me to have a look at it and find out that it had about £4,500 worth of damp in it. The problem with that was they went to someone who is, again, deemed to be an expert, but they weren't in the approved workshop scheme, and they didn't know how to test a Bailey. They were testing the walls, which is there's no point doing that in the Bailey because it's plastic and all the water ingress is in the floor. In fact, if you have a look at the Bailey video where I'm testing the meter, it's that van, and it's fairly easy to see when you know what you're looking for. So you have to be careful, but unfortunately there was no comeback on that because the guy wasn't even in the approved workshop scheme. Okay, so be very careful, even if there is documented proof that there's no water ingress. Again, unless you know that company or know who those people are, and if they are in the approved workshop scheme, you've got a little bit comeback. If they're not, it could be anyone. So again, even if you do have documented proof, it can still be a bit of an issue. Okay, so that's the downside. There's no comeback whatsoever. If you do buy a caravan and it has got faults on it, you're kind of on your own. It is buyer beware. So this is where I really don't like it. And obviously, the higher value the caravan, in theory, you think that there'll be less wrong with it, but that's just not the case. It's kind of the other way around. If you pay £15,000 for a caravan off a private individual and it's got damp in it, it's going to be more costly than if you buy something at £5,000 and don't really worry about it. Okay, so be wary of that. And fraud, kind of, I know you get told about this a lot, but don't hand over any money if you haven't seen the product. It's best not to buy on a motorway service station or anything like that. Go to the customer's house, the seller's house. Make sure you can see the caravan and make sure everything's okay with it. You can kind of arm yourself a little bit. I've got a couple of videos that would be of interest of how to buy a caravan. And also have a look at the water ingress one, how to find water ingress. That's a very important one if you're going to have a look at caravans, because at least you'll be able to see a little bit of whether you've got water ingress or not. You'll be able to look in the right places at the very least. Okay, so that's buying from a private individual. To summarise, you can get a bit of a better deal. You might get some kit with it, you might get an awning, but just make sure you're getting value for money with those. The downside, and I can't stress this enough, is there is no legal rights. If you buy off a caravan off a private individual, it is buyer beware. You can't go to court. You can't go back to them and say, I want my money back and all that kind of thing. Okay, so that's buying privately. We will now be talking about buying from a dealership. Totally forgot to mention, there is something else that you need to worry about when buying from a private individual. Now you can do what's called an HPI check on the caravan. Now the caravan has got a VIN on it. There's a 17-digit number made up of numbers and letters that are stamped on the window and also on the CRIS document. Now if you do an HPI check, there's three things that will check for you. Whether there's any insurance claim against it, whether it's been written off, and it's fairly easy to write off a caravan, so that does happen fairly often. It will tell you whether it's been stolen and the police got a claim against it. And also it will tell you whether it's got finance on it as well. So it's very important. This is the very least you can do, is get the VIN off the customer, off the seller, and do an HPI check. It's about £15 online, and it will tell you whether it's all clear or not. It is very important, because again, if it is stolen and then you get the caravan and then you try and do a register it with Chris, obviously that flags up with Chris. They'll have something against it, then they'll know where you are, and then they will inform the police. So it's very important to do that HPI check if you are buying from a private individual, because there is, again, no comeback whatsoever. If you buy something that's stolen, written off, or has got finance against it, then you're going to lose it. As simple as that. Also, just double check that the year is correct as well. Now, I get this quite a lot, where a customer has had a look at their Chris document and it says it was registered in 2012. It can actually be a 2011 caravan, but it just wasn't registered to 2012. Now, the VIN will tell you what year it actually is, and it's quite important because it can make quite a bit of difference. Some cases I've seen where it's 3 or 4 years different. Obviously, that's, you know, the customer, the seller was told, sometimes even by a dealership, that it was a certain year, and it turns out not to be. So double check that. It's the first thing I do. I always go and ask the seller, oh, what year was it again? And they'll tell me, and then I have a look on the VIN, only to find that it's actually different. And I'll put a link up in a second to where you can actually have a look at what the numbers and letters mean on the VIN of the caravan. So check the year, do an HPI check, make sure that that there's no finance against it, there's no insurance claims, and the police aren't looking for it, and at least you know where you are with that.